So welcome everybody that's attending the PDM administration training refresher. Today's focus is going to be on refreshing some of the kind of core basics of PDM admin, but really as quick as possible I'm going to try to get into some unique content and hopefully refresh on some of the skills that that you might have learned already or you should learn in the future. My name is Eric Van Essen, so I oversee the product line here at Javelin. I've been with Javelin close to 12 years, the last 11 of which I've been really focused on PDM. Been certified as a PDM specialist and of course a SOLIDWORKS professional as well, and have an engineering and management background. Now just a quick warning, I personally don't see these training sessions as a replacement for proper training. We've had a number of clients that if they try to do too much without being properly trained in admin, it just does not go very well, and it can be much more costly to fix and repair and undo than it is to get properly trained and do it right to begin with. So just a little bit of warning for you. I do, whatever you need to do to get your knowledge up, though, at the end of the day, we just want to make sure you're knowledgeable. So I am curious if you have taken the admin course, if you could answer the poll there would be great. All right, perfect. Yeah, it's pretty much what I expected. So thanks everybody for answering that. So most of you have taken the admin course, which is amazing. So hopefully this isn't too basic for you, because of course that is a great course. But if you haven't taken it in a while, it doesn't hurt to do a little refresher, right? So the agenda that I put together is that I thought would be relevant is to talk a little bit about reusing existing administrative setup. I wanted to talk about go into templates, because that's a common area that I see underutilized out there in the PDM world. So I wanted to refresh on how templates work and how they can help you standardize how you do work. We're going to talk about manipulating workflow and doing some automating tasks. We can touch on some qualifying criteria for transitions, and I think something, if we have time, I'm going to introduce some PDF publishing as well to give you a sense of how that works. And then we're going to talk about customizing search forms and creating search favorites to help people with their productivity of working through files. And then we're going to talk about the columns, so adding variables to columns for search forms, Windows Explorer, for bill of materials, all the different types of areas where you might have columns. That again is something which a lot of people don't recognize that they should continue to evolve to meet their needs. Okay, I do have time at the end for Q&A, so happy to touch on any topics that you want afterwards. So hopefully this content is of interest to you, and if not, stick around and ask some questions that hopefully I can pass some knowledge on. So let's get right into it. So reusing administrative setup. I'm going to launch the PDM admin tool. Let me just quickly do that now. So if you're not familiar with the admin tool, you just type in administration in your start menu, and PDM admin comes in. The vault I'm going to use is a vault that I created 1 hour ago. So I just did a webinar before this, starting at 2 p.m. Eastern on some basics of PDM admin, and so I started a new vault, and everything that we see in here I created really in the last hour. So if anything doesn't go quite as planned, that's why. So just give me a little bit of a break, but I'm sure we'll work through it. But this is actually a good kind of start in for the first topic, which is reusing existing administrative setup. So the way that you can do that is if you have access to other vaults, or if you have access to, or if you're doing like services with ourselves or somebody that's working at another company, they have the ability to take existing content and export it. So I'm going to take this other vault called PDM Professional and just right-click and export, and all of that information turns into this whole list of information that can help you rebuild a vault very quickly based on what content you had in the past. I can save that file, so I can hit save, and the file format's a CEX file. So a file like this, there's cases where when we do services, we can pass this on, or if you're trying to accomplish a certain thing in one vault, and then you want to pass it to another vault, or you want to keep it for in case you need it for the future, you can do it that way. You don't even need to export it to use it, because really now on this right side I have a list of content that I can pull from and pull into this new training vault, this PDM training test vault I just did an hour ago. Specifically, the thing that I wanted to concentrate on next, and I thought I'd start with here, is the templates. So if I go down to the templates, let's go all the way down here, and I do a template for a new project launch. Another good template is engineering change. We have some great automation around there. But if I just drag and drop this new project launch and drag it into my templates, what it's going to do is prompt me, do I want to replace it with a new object or whatnot? And it's actually okay to replace with a new object, because what it'll do is merge some of that content together and make sure that you have permissions. At least, hopefully, I'm not getting that right. It's not something that I'm personally ever too concerned with, but you do. I guess you probably should be careful a little bit on some of that. And what we've done is added that template. So that template's there, and at the same time, we've added other cards. So you can see on template cards, there's a create new project card as part of that. That wasn't there a minute ago. Okay. So I just wanted to cover that first, because when you're setting up more stuff on PDM, it's quite possible that you want to set it up in a secondary vault and then move it over to the production vault when you're ready. And this is the way you'd want to do that. Export and import is the quickest way. The other real key thing to be aware of is that if there's anything that you're trying to take on as a company that does not that you're looking for guidance on, just be aware that we not only do we come with a lot of experience, but we come with administrative export files. So we come with a lot of content that can really help us be set up engineering change orders or processes much more quickly. So that's the first thing I wanted to cover. Let's move on to templates. So templates, what they do, oops, excuse me, wrong folder there. What they do is they get you set up to automate folders and files. So let's go into the vault that I just created. And currently I have this projects area, and right in the root of that projects area I have all this CAD data. That's obviously not where I want users to put it. I want them to put it into a folder with the appropriate project name. So if you have PDM standard, you can manually create the folders, of course. But with PDM Professional, templates is really a great area that adds the automation. So I'm going to go in and create, I'm going to show you how this new template works called New Project Launch. And I'll actually go in and modify it first and just make sure it's what I want before we start using it. So in the administration area, under templates, I have this New Project Launch. So just double click that. This first area is how it shows up on your command string. So when you right click and go to New Templates, then it shows up as New Project Launch. And if you want it indented, you can do like project / new launch or whatnot. Let's just keep hitting next. You can use the permissions of the logged in users, but a lot of templates I personally recommend setting up. Like you might get them finalized just using your permissions, just because it's easier to go in and out. You don't have to type in a password to modify it. But best practice is actually to leverage templates to borrow permissions. And the reason I say that is because it's actually a good practice to stop users from creating content that is not to company standard. And maybe not all content, but definitely project folders would be a great example that you don't want users to go create otherwise or manually without if you have the ability to standardize it. Let's go next. So next thing is where you have the ability to edit. You can go directly to the card editor and manipulate the card that drives that. And that's where you can get some input content. And there's also the template variables. So the template variables are information that is stored temporarily in the template that you can use to drive into the folder names, the file names, or the properties of the folders or files. Okay? And it is a little bit confusing when you start out viewing templates, but the reason why they're here is because this data can actually come from multiple spots. And this is actually a great example of this. We have all of this project name and customer name, all this information, which is actually coming from the card variable, that input form. And then we have one over here on the top, which is project year, where it says, well, I don't want to ask somebody which year it is. I just want to generate the year. In this particular case, it's based on a serial number that is equivalent to the project year, which actually isn't even necessary. You know, just to show you, to be a little bit more straightforward, we can do a format string and just pick up in our options of generating content, we can pick up a 4-digit year, so with century. Okay, so that project year is something that you can use later on. Okay, let's go on to next, and you'll see this in action in a minute. The next is what you're creating with this template. So in this case, this particular template, I was experimenting the other day, and I wanted to force it to start creating 2017 folders. So I manually changed the year to 2017 instead of making it what it really should be when you launch a project. So I'm going to change that back now and show you how. You simply go and click on a folder, and then between the percentage signs, you put the name of the template variable that you want to use. In this case, we want to create a new folder that's equivalent to the year. So in this case, it's still 2016. We should be generating automatically a 2016 folder. If I were to launch this on January 1st without any work from administration, it should automatically create a 2017 folder. This particular template automatically drives or creates a name that's the project number dash the project name, and then it has subfolders underneath that. Okay, and then it also has a document in here as well. And for the demo today, I'm just going to remove that document. So just stick with the folder structure, and that's kind of a good thing to start with for automating. Select next, next, and then you want to make sure that the right users have permissions. So you can select the groups or individual users if you want them to have permissions, and select OK. Okay. So let's see this in action. I can right-click. In this case, because it was at the root of the vault, you can actually right-click anywhere in the vault and go New Project Launch. Okay. You get prompted with this form. In this case, I had it set up for a serial number generation for a new project. We'll do sample project. We can categorize that project like so. Pick project manager and customer. And when I select OK, it's going to take that information and it's going to automatically generate a year folder because it's the first project I'm launching in 2016. Automatically generate a project folder, 3720-sample project. And then underneath that, generate the folders required. Now the files that I put within here, if I click there, you'll notice that the values of this project folders actually aren't filled in yet. And that's actually because I didn't get all of the content that I needed really to drive the standard the way I wanted. I needed to make sure that my folder card was accurate and updated correctly. So let's go back to the administration folder, and I'll show you what I mean. You need to make sure when you do generate new content that you do pull the right parts of it. So let's go to the folder card that we're working from. So this is the default folder card, and really an important piece to the puzzle to make sure it updates correctly is to use the folder card that you intended to update, because it's the one that links to the right variables and the way you had it set up from before. And if not, you just need to do some work to make sure it's working accurately. So I'm going to browse up and go and get that folder card. So I'm going to say just drag in that folder card here. And I'm going to say, yes, I want to overwrite that folder card. And let's launch that one more time. So go New Project Launch, Test Project 2. categorize it, so forth. Go back to the 2016 folder. I have my test project 2. And now when you go and click on the project card, you'll notice that it is filled in with all of that great project information. So in this case, there was some differences between the folder card that came from the vault that I started the template in, and the new vault that I created. In this case, I decided to use the folder card that came from the vault that it started with. Okay. The main, a big benefit of standardizing this is to drive that information into the files themselves. So if I go and add a file to that vault, let me go and browse for some content here. Give me 1 second. Excuse me. There we go. Okay. So I have some sample files here. If I go and drag and drop a file in there and go to the data card, you'll notice that I don't have that information sorted out either, or driven in from the project. And a lot of times what you want to do is drive that project information from that template down into the files themselves. So I'm going to show you how to do that. And I'm going to I'm going to do that again from the admin. What we'll do just to get familiar with it, I'll actually do one from scratch. I'm not going to do them all, but I'm going to do one from scratch. So I'm in the vault here. I want to modify that part data card that we have there. And I do want to make sure that when I'm looking at the data where it's coming from, that I'm dealing with the same variable. And the best way to do that is to bring up the folder data card that I have. Okay. So there might have been a little bit of different naming convention used for this. So the folder data I want on the file. So I'm going to use the project number as a field. Okay. So I'm going to drag that down. And I'm going to use the project name. So I'm going to copy that from the folder card. There we go. And obviously when you're doing this sort of stuff, it's ideally you're clean, but usually cleaning up and making it look pretty is the last step. The next thing I want to do is I want to make sure that the data on this part comes from that folder itself. So this project name and project number, you can see that they're text values. What I really want to do is make sure that they get filled in every time I add a file from the folder that they come from. So what I can do here is link that to the appropriate variable. In this case, I'm going to link it to project name. And be careful because I do actually have a typo in here, so I have two, like one with a space and one without. And ideally, it's best practice in my mind to do default overwrites. And what that does is if it already has a variable, but I copy it to a new project, do I want the new project to be the placeholder? And to me, the answer is always yes. You might have a different opinion with how you work there. But do make sure that they're linked to the right variable and default overwrites. Okay. Select save. In fact, actually, I don't have permission to save to that folder, so I'm just going to swap over to that min login for a second to save to that folder. Okay. So the way to do that is to log back in. There we go. Oops, should be logged in. Okay. So now I have the permission to save. Okay. So now that I've updated that data card, so I launch a new project, the data is ending up in the folder correctly. I want to have it end up in the file. So let's try another test. I'm going to drag in a file. And you can see now that the project name and project number get driven into the file there because they're driving from the project that they come in. So a philosophy that we use, as we're setting up PDM is you want to reduce the number of fields that you have to manually enter. And if there's a lot of similarity between multiple files, you got to think, does that make sense to drive from somewhere else besides manually entering it? Drop-down lists at very least, that sort of idea. Okay. So that's what I wanted to show you for project or for templates again. Let's go and actually just delete some of these files that are outside of the standard area. So now I have this nice standard area. When I go new, launch new project, I fill in the form, so test 3, so forth. If anybody wants to see like more on this, editing the drop-down lists and cascading them and whatnot, I'm happy to dive into that later on. But I just wanted to focus on creating the templates. Based on that information, that gets now filled into the data card, and then driving into the folder itself. If I drive files, and in this case I'm going to drag all the files because I'm feeling, well, at least I'm feeling pretty good about all the part files because that's what I updated, and check them in. Okay. You'll notice that each one of these files reliably has that new project number 3722. Okay. So again, any questions about that? Happy to answer then. Type them in now while they're on your mind. But let's get moving with some more content. Let's go on to workflow automation. Okay. So what I wanted to talk about for workflow automation is a couple of things. I wanted to talk about automating some of the variables. In this case, I don't have any of this set up to automate in the workflow, except for revision was done by default. So I thought a good example would be to set up a checked by, or approved by, excuse me, and automate that in the workflow. And the other thing I wanted to do was automate the task of producing a PDF of that. That's the kind of two things that I wanted to touch on workflow automation, because two very common ones that if you know how to do those, you can, the wheels will turn and you can start doing lots more. Let's start with the data card update. To actually, just to show this example first, if I change state, actually I'll go straight into it because I know there's no point in showing it that it does not work yet because I know it doesn't work yet. All right, so let's go into our workflow. This is the workflow that the files are going through. The files all ended up in a status called under editing. I'm going to submit them for approval in a minute, but really what I want to do is have the magic happen on past approval. So when I go past approval, so far there's a couple actions that happen, and both of them are related to the revision. We're bumping the revision, we're writing the revision to a variable revision, and we're also bumping the revision in the system. So it's stamped and has special properties in the system. I'm going to add a new action. So you select Add New Action, and in this case I want to I want to set variable is what I'm looking for. We'll give it a descriptive name so it's easy to manage. So we'll say set approved by. The variable I want to set is approved by, and the value of it I'm going to set based on the user, and this could be the user login. There could be other user information as well, so it could be like full name or initials. In this case I'm just going to do, actually let's do full name. So you have some options. We'll do it's approved by and we'll use their full login name. Select OK. Actually, one thing that I'll point out is that you can limit it to certain file types. So if you only wanted that to be done for drawings, at this point you can just do that for SLD DRWs. But in this case I'm going to say why not do it for all files that have that variable in there. Okay. So that's kind of the first one. Let's do another one. So I'm going to add action, set a different variable. In this case I'm going to say set approved date, and the variable that is in there is approved on is the variable I want to use. And in this case the value that I want to do is just date, and the date is actually going to be whatever date this action happens on. Select OK, and now you have both those actions. Okay. Now the order of this does matter, but I wanted to point out something by basically showing you what not to do, so to really hit this home with the order of this that should matter. So hold on to this thought. Some of you might be thinking, oh boy, you got that out of order, it's wrong. But it's easier to kind of learn the order if you see what happens when you get it wrong. Okay? So let's save that workflow, and that's good to go there. The next thing I wanted to do is modify the data card. So the file data card I wanted to modify, we're going to focus specifically on drawings. So we'll go into that drawing data card there. And I'm not using checked by, so I'm actually just going to change these over. I want to move these, and I actually want to say these are approved by. So we'll just change this data card to contain the data approved by. And instead of check date, the variable that I want to use is approved on, is the date variable I want to use. So most importantly, the variables that that you're using in the workflow obviously are the ones that you need to be moving here. The previous webinar I did, by the way, I set those variables and I linked them to a custom property, approved date, and approved by that can drive back into the file itself. Okay, let's save that data card and we'll give it a whirl. So let's take that drawing. We're going to change state. So in this case, I want to submit for approval. That's that first arrow. Okay, you can write in a comment, but just for testing, I'm just going to bypass it and go quick. It's now waiting for approval. The approved by date and revision are all blank. And if I right click and go to change state past approval, this is the new action that I added. Okay, it'll go to approved, and you'll see that the name system administrator and today's date, the formatting is obviously the formatting they have set up in the Vault, so you want to make sure you're consistent on that, and the revision are all filled in there. Okay, so that part of it worked. Now to hit it home that issues that we were having with the order, or that where I warned you on the order, this is what I wanted to point out, in that the data got changed and the revision got stamped afterwards, and I just realized that it's possible that they've made a fix in 2017 that the order doesn't matter as much, because usually what happens is another version happens afterwards. So I'm a little confused why that didn't happen there, but so it's quite possible the order doesn't matter in 2017, which is a little bit funny for me making such a big deal out of it. But what I will warn is that the best practice is to keep that increment revision to be the last in the list. So that's what we always recommend. I'm not sure why it didn't create a version to set the approved date afterwards, but make sure that that does that is that last step on the list is best practice. Okay. So that's pretty good. If there's any questions about that, feel free to type them in, and I'll get to them later on as we go through the content. The next automation I wanted to add in this workflow is the PDF publishing. So when I generated this Vault, I generated out of a default template that came with some nice tasks. And there's a nice one called Convert that I'd recommend getting in your Vault if you don't already have it. And be warned that if you have it already set up, it's quite possible that you want to redo it with the newest Convert task, because when you upgrade your Vault, you don't automatically get the newest Convert task or any of these newer tasks. So it's a good idea to kind of make sure that you're getting the latest to get the latest capabilities. So let's go through this task. First thing is, where do you want to execute it? You can prompt or you can let the system choose. In this case, I'm going to say execute on where the task is initiated, because that's what I'm only capable of right now, because I'm working off my own computer. But you can see that there's no possible computers here yet. The way to do that is to modify. Whoops, let me do that. So in the bottom right area, you have access to your Vault, and you can right-click and configure your task area. And then in your Vault, you can then permit on each individual computer whether they're allowed executing that task. So that's an important thing to be aware of, is permitting the computers that you want to execute that task to actually execute the task. Now that I've done that, if I refresh the list, you'll notice that my computer name, Javelin 198, is available. So I'm going to check that off, saying, yes, that's a good one. Execute on the computer where they're initiated, and yes, that's an approved one. Okay. The next is where you show it. So if you're in the right-click menu, you can directly access it with the right permission, and then go through the conversion settings. In this case, I want to save out a PDF file, and you can allow all these settings to be prompted, but I'm a big fan of setting it the way I want, and then deselecting the change from the user so that it just happens automatically and they don't get a prompt of what's about to happen. You can have a data card that helps drive some of that information if you want some additional information along the way, but you don't have to, and most customers don't. And then you want to put some thought into where you want it stored. In this case, I don't really, like this is actually saving it in the default, but it's tacking on the original file name and the configuration, which a lot of which I personally don't think is necessary. So I'm actually going to redo this from scratch. I'm personally a big fan of having if you publish PDFs in a standard area of your vault. So you can do your root folder path as an example. I'm going to add it, called it published, or let's call it released drawings, and do /. And at that point, actually an interesting thing is if I did want them broken out by project, because all of them are getting their project number driven into there, I could actually add variables at this time and add add project number as an example folder, if that's reliably on all those files. That's a new thing in the 2017 task automation, by the way. So again, if you've upgraded to 2017, you're not seeing this. It's because you haven't upgraded the specific convert task side. In this case, I'm going to do the source file name as the example. So all the PDFs are going to end up in a folder called release drawings with PDF. And that's what I want all the time, so I do not want to prompt the user to create them. Now, an interesting thing that I always recommend is, do you want to reference back to the destination? I think, why not? That's fantastic. So you know which file it came from, and you know which version of the file too. And what do you want to do when there's another one? Do you want to replace it, replace existing file, or create a new version of existing file? And I'm personally a fan of creating a new version of existing file, and that way you're building up a version history of those released PDFs as well. Okay. Then we want to go through and say permission. Okay, so which users or groups are allowed accessing this task. Okay. Now that's, in all honesty, that's who can manually do it. So they don't have to have permission to execute it on a workflow, which I'm going to do anyhow. So that might not be necessary for you. And then you want any notifications on success or error. Okay. So that's a little bit about modifying that task. In order to actually get that task to happen, we need to trigger it as part of a workflow. So as those files pass approval, I'm going to automate an action to produce a PDF. So again, I'm going to select Add Action. In this case, instead of incrementing variable, I want to execute that task. And the task I want to execute that I just modified was the convert task. And this is a good example of something that you may not want to do on every file. You might just want to do for SOLIDWORKS drawings as an example. So we're going to say publish PDF of drawing. Select OK. And OK. Now a task like that would be something that you typically do after, at the end of the run of that. So after it's incremented is the last thing. So let's select OK. Save that workflow, and let's generate some more content. When I'm testing, personally, what I do is I just quickly copy and paste another copy of that file if I needed a new file to work with, and then I'll pass it through a workflow. So I'll do submit for approval. Okay, so it's waiting for approval, and now we'll change state past approval, like so. So it's now approved, and then what we can do is monitor if that task indeed is happening. So back in the administration area, there's an area in the administration called, during the task, so the task list. So if I double click that, you can see that there is indeed a convert task ready to go. And right now it's waiting for host. And the reason it's waiting is there's a time period that it cycles through and to see when a host is available. You can see that something is just flickered there with the mouse. So in the background, it's processing that this file is being saved. Okay, like so. So it says in progress. as it goes, and then as it completes, it should show complete, unless there's an issue, which could be like if it has an issue with the login. But in this case, it did complete, and you can see okay that it's completed. Typically, customers are, ideally this sort of stuff is happening on a server, so you're not tying up a user's computer as well. But it's still, it's better to happen automatically on the user's computer than have them click and do it manually every time anyhow. So let's go to the root folder of the Vault. You can see release drawings. We have that copy of PDF there. And if I click on the Contains tab, you can see that that's related to that particular drawing. Okay. So lots of really nice, nice automation there. You can also get the data card filled in as you go through as well. Totally up to you what what your preference is on the data card and whether that gets transcribed as well. Okay. All right. So hopefully that was informative to help with automating. Those are the two most common things we're helping customers automate. Is automate what data do you want to update along the way in different workflows, and what do you want to actually have happen, right? So automating that PDF. Let's move on to search forms and favorites. Again, if there's any questions along the way, feel free to type them in, and I'm sure I'll get to them later on. So on the right bottom or top right side, just as a refresher, is where you access your search forms. And so far, the only search form that I have access to is this complete search form. Okay. It also, has this default where it just starts searching in the folder that I started in. Okay. So let's go back and let's actually start with a copied search form from an administrative setup. So I'm going to go back to that admin export that I have, and I'm actually going to go and take an admin or a search form that I have from the previous Vault. Let's go over to there we go. So let's go to engineering search. Okay. So I'm going to drag engineering search over and go to cards and go to search cards. And now I have this engineering search card. So another good example of the value of kind of starting with somebody who has that content and experience, right, to get things going. So instead of, I can actually open them up side by side just so you get a sense of what they both look like. So let's go File, Open. I can filter that by search card. So let's do complete search card. So this is the default one out of the box, and this is the one that actually I put together a number of years ago that we always get customers set up with as a starting point. And the reason I like this is that basically, I find this overwhelming, as you go through. Okay, it's just a little bit too much, and it takes a lot of training. And in practice, customers don't, or people, or users, I should say, don't end up using search as much as they should because they get confused with this. So as an example, I've taken like history text. So you go down to your history, and there's history text. And the reason I did that is that if you put a person's name in the history text, is a really great way to see if that person has ever worked on it, right? So in the search card I said worked on by, but I'm searching the history text. So stuff like that is subtle, but really makes it more intuitive as customers as companies work. Let's take one out here. So I'm going to take material out as an example because I just want to add a different one to show, or something new in that spot to show an example. So I'll save that search card. And then I want to think about who do I want to have access to. And I'm logged in as the system administrator right now, so I'll just test it with admin. So I have that admin search form, search results like that. And then we'll go and test it out. So let's do the drop-down list now. And now you'll see that beyond complete search, I have engineering search. So now we have both. Now I can see the search card in action. Okay. So some nice stuff as well, like date range. Was this file modified, after the 15th in search? And those are all the files that were modified after the 15th, right? Or was it modified before the 14th in search? And and actually this is a private state, so it doesn't count. That's another reason there, not to get too detailed, but you'll see that the files don't show up because I just created this this vault today. Okay. Another nice thing is the is the default folder location. You can see that as I'm working in a projects area, like say I'm working in a project, and I wanted to search for a new file that I needed to go and use in this project. So I want to access the search card and drop that down, and I want to search for, I don't know, let's type in something like, I guess we'll type in clamp because I see it there. There you see the file name. Okay. So the idea is that by defaulting to the root folder, because search is working off the database, it's so fast. In my opinion, the root folder should probably almost always be, or the default folder should almost always be the root. So that's kind of the default search card isn't like that. So that's something that should be set up that way. So let's go and look at how that behaves, and let's maybe think of something else that we want to search by. So I'm just going to look at the data card. Yeah, actually, why don't we add created by as a search field? Okay. So just because obviously there's limited options with what's in these data card in this new vault. So I'm just going to want to add something just as a test. Okay. So I'll go into the card editor, and before I add something, I just want to show you where those defaults are. So as you're working on the card, there's card default values at the top, and that's where you can put the default values as search folder path as /, and that's going to search the root folder path. The other thing that I like as a default is find files 1 and find folders 0. What that does as a default is don't include folders in your search result, only include files. Okay, so stuff like that is is kind of why it's nice to start with some content from us. And again, all that stuff works on PDM standard or professional, but these are examples of much or a lot of content that's in there. So in order to add a new search field, I'm going to just click on a field and just go and click on my form and add it. Okay. I then need to link that to a variable. So in this case, the variable that I want to link it to is the well, actually, I know what it is, but I'm not going to tell you yet because let's actually just temporarily do it somewhere else. Because really, in my opinion, the best practice is to be working with the file data card at the exact same time. So let's go over to the file data card, and you can see that the created by, the variable that is linked to is author. Okay, so what I actually want this linked to is author if I want to search by that. Now I could link that to author. Actually, I think that's what I'll do. I'll just link to author. So we'll click on this variable, go to the variable drop-down list, and then go all the way down to author. Okay, so the value in here is going to search whatever data card value is in there. Okay, and then now I could have done this to begin with, but I'll also show you that you could always copy from one folder to another, of course. So I'll take that data and I'll copy it from one folder to another. Okay, and of course I can adjust the fonts and make this all pretty, but this is kind of good enough just to add some basic manipulation. Okay, let's go back over to the search card and see that in action. Okay, so in order to refresh the search card, you do need to just quickly toggle over to another one and back to it. And then if you were to type in to say, okay, let's look at all files that were created by admin, those show up there. If you see all files that were created by Eric, you can see there's a few files that were created there as well. Okay, just because of my previous login. Okay, so pretty nice, pretty easy to go and modify the search form. Highly recommended, and really put some thought into what is the data that's important to you to make sure users have search forms that are applicable to their role. Let's move on to search favorites. So search favorites are these start areas, and really they're meant to, as a way to repeat a search that you do on a very regular basis. Okay, a very common way to use search favorites is file status. So for instance, if I'm in a managerial role and I want to search for files waiting for approval, you can hit that, you can run the search. In this case, there's no files, but even without any files, it doesn't really matter. It's all about the search form. I can hit add to favorites. So we'll call it waiting for approval. And the search favorites I can share with users or entire groups of people. And search favorites, unfortunately, is limited to PDM Professional. I'll put that out there. So it is. There's a lot of productivity type tools like that are limited to Professional. In Standard, you could get around it somewhat with using some defaults. So you have search forms with different defaults, but it's one of the many reasons and benefits of Professional. So let's flip up that search card and let's go and make sure that I have some files that are waiting for approval. So I'm just going to right click and submit them for approval. Select OK. So those are now waiting for approval. And the way search favorites show up is under that drop down of those search cards, I now have waiting for approval as a star. And you click that and it launches that search form and it creates those search favorites as well. Another common way to use search favorites is checked out by. So if I'm Eric, or even if I'm an administrator, I could do this for Eric. What I could do is run a search to say I want to find all files that are checked out by Eric, save it as a favorite, and say checked out by Eric. Okay, and I want to share it with them. I don't necessarily want to share it with groups or in other individuals. And the nice thing there is that when Eric's logged in, and in this case it's not even by myself, you'll be able to run it directly from that area. There you go. So checked out by Eric. So repeat and be able to see those search. So that's a real nice way. At the end of the day, it's highly recommended to bulk check everything and check in those files. Okay, so search favorites are quite nice. One other thing that I'll point out, on searching before I move on is the Standalone Search tool. So this, if you drop down, you have the ability to launch the Search tool, and this is a standalone Search. Okay, and this is where you have access to all of those search cards and search favorites in one spot. You can, and some benefits of this Search tool is that you can search multiple vaults at once. This search tool is, again, limited to PDM Professional. So if you're a standard PDM Standard user out there, you don't have access to this. Personally, my favorite benefit of this search tool, however, is the ability to get the content out to Excel. So this can be extremely useful when you're generating reports and manipulating data. So I'll just show you a quick example of that. I get that data out to Excel. I can take that information and let's do insert a quick, let's do a recommended chart as an example. There, that one looks pretty good. Select OK. So in a couple clicks, you got a breakdown of all the statuses of your files and the number of the files that are waiting for a certain status. So you have 9 files under editing, 3 that are approved, 2 waiting for approval. So literally in a couple clicks, where I personally find this really useful, and I've worked with a lot of customers to use it as a key strategy, is figure out those quick ways to generate reports on project status. It's a nice way to get a sense of, if there's a high number of files that are approved in a project, that's a good benchmark of how far along you are on that project, and you can relate that to how far along you believe you should be on that project, right? So it's real nice to use search results that way as well. All right. So that's what I plan to show on search forms and favorites. Hopefully you guys picked up a few things there. The last one, I believe, is the adding variables to columns. Okay, so let's go over to the administration side again, and I'll just point out a couple areas where columns come into play. So there's actually an area called columns, okay, and there's also bill of materials. So both of those behave very similarly. Okay, so let's create a new column set. So let's go and let's create a new column set. So the two types of column sets are file lists and search results. So file lists is is for Windows Explorer. So what you can do is say, we'll just call it Explorer View. And then you can add information that you think should be available to people when they're working in Explorer. So an example being version number, right? You know, another example being maybe revision, right? What's the current revision variable? Another example being, actually, what's a good one? Yeah, actually the most common one added, it's funny that I didn't think of this to first, but is description. Okay, so these are all values that you want to potentially have people have access or users to have access to, and you can of course add as many as you want, and then you can make them available and to groups or users of users as they log in. Okay, so to get those available, let's actually make them available to both my users. Select OK. Okay. In order to see that in action, what I do need to do is log off and log back in. So I'm going to log off, admin. Okay. Oops, logged off the wrong vault. There we go. So I'm logged off again. I'm just going to hit back, and I'm going to log back in. There we go. And then you can see on the right side that new column set that I just added got added. So I have version number, revision, and description. Okay. At this point, a user's up to his own discretion to rearrange those. And this is, you know, this in all honesty, I kind of wish there was a little bit more standardized, because it'd be really nice if you could set up the exact columns all on the left in the order and push that out. I personally haven't seen a way to do that. You know, well, you probably could do it in registry key updates, but I haven't gone that far. But yeah, the most importantly is get that information available, and you know, it's an important part of user training. So as you're training users at your environment, or when we're doing user training, this is an important part of the user training course, is to customize, you know, the information that you want in your view to kind of get that information accessible. And this version number is quite nice, so you can see what version you have cached and what version you have on. So for instance, if I took this file and I went and got an earlier version, so I'll get version 1, like so, you'll see that it's a warning and I'm version 1 out of 2. And when I get the latest version, like that, it will automatically go from 1 to 2 out of 2. Okay, and in this case I was just mucking around with you know, with the data, so they won't look any different. But if you're comparing revisions, that can be really handy, and it's really nice to see graphically in the columns what you have access to. Okay, so that's columns for Windows Explorer. Columns are also used for searching. So when I imported that search card from that list, I got this whole list, or this engineering search results is the recommended list of data that comes in engineering search. So what you can do is is add new columns here as well. So you can do new column, and you can, I don't know, I'll pick a random one. Well, let's see if I can find something that's practical that I could use. Yeah, we'll do latest. We'll do size. I don't think size on there. Okay, select OK. So now that engineering search result is used. Now you do need to make sure when you're working on the search card that the appropriate column is selected. So in this case, when you're working on the search card, there's an option to set which column you want to use. So I want to make sure I'm using that engineering search result as the column. And now if I were to run that search, let's go drop down engineering search results and hit play. You'll see on the right I now have access to the file size. Okay? So if you're cleaning up your vault, you might want to search for files that have been, you know, older than 2014 or something like that. You know, search for ones that are of a high file or a large file size. And those, if you need to free up space for some reason, which most customers usually don't, in all honesty, but if you do, that's kind of where you tackle them. Stuff that's older, make sure it's not used, doesn't have a history, that sort of idea. Okay. So yeah, so columns are great there too. And the last part about columns is, let's go and search here, is the bill of materials and also the contains and where used. So these columns can also be manipulated. So if you right click in here, you can go to columns and you can go to more, and you can actually add more columns here. So you can do like author example. Okay. And the bill of materials, that's controlled centrally. So the columns are controlled in the bill of materials here. So it looks like almost identical to their interface, which is why I kind of grouped it together. But obviously there's special functionality around the bill of materials, and you can space them out and whatnot. And that bill of materials is what shows up when you click the bill of materials tab on that file. Okay. So hopefully that was helpful for you to kind of refresh on some of that functionality. There's lots of good use of columns, and at the end of the day, the reason for columns is to get information to you when you need it. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Q&A. So I went a little bit long on the content, so I'm happy to stay longer with some Q&A. If you need to get running to another meeting, no problem. Thanks very much for attending. I did record this, so if you do want the recording, if you want to share it with anybody or review it yourself, feel free to ask or have a look for it on our YouTube channel. I'm sure it'll be there at some point.